Hello everyone and welcome back to Millicraft and welcome back to the Gray Box. In today's episode, we are going to be going over all of these very basic Minecraft blocks. But I'm not going to be going over the blocks themselves. I'm going to be going over what they could be instead of the blocks that they are. So we're going to be using some tips and techniques in order to make some of these blocks into other things. And most of them are going to be for like interior designing. Some of them will be like outdoor things. Some of them will have multiple uses, but all of them will have a different use than what they're actually made for. So let's begin. The first block we're going to look at are trapdoors. Trapdoors are one of the most flexible types of blocks we have in Minecraft. You can make chairs. You can make a trellis if you want to do some gardening. Whoop. Doorways. You can do shutters around windows, garbage containers, or toilets, or trash containers. You can make cool looking fan systems, or you can create paper walls. You can make tables. You can make chairs. Whoops. The trapdoor is one of the most flexible items that we have in Minecraft. You can use them for eaves. You can use them for shelves. You can use them for just a decorative block around another build. You can use them to make lines. There are so many things that you can use with trapdoors, so I would suggest if you need a very flat or very thin block to decorate up your build, try a trapdoor. Stairs are another super functional block that we have in Minecraft. Obviously, you can use them for stairs, but you can also use them for roofs and for porches. Like in the video behind me, our last video, I showed you how to use a lot of stairs for other building things, but you can use them for a lot of other decorative uses as well. You can make a chair with them. You can put little signs. They like very thin armchairs. You can make tables with them. By turning them upside down. You can make planters. Or you can make fountains or little pools of water. You can also make bathtubs out of them. Or water features. You could make fancy shelves with them or use them for decorating the inside of your build. With a combination of these two blocks, you can make a really cool grandfather clock. Fences and fence gates have a absolute ton of uses. So let's say we have our bathtub here and we want to make a shower head. Now we have a shower for our tub. You can use fences alongside of pressure plates or a trapdoor to make a very easy little side table. You can use fence gates above windows in order to give a very unique little awning design. Fences can also be used to build little tiny trees. Or small bushes. And used for like lighting sources and street lamps. Anything that you need a very thin stick of some sort, you can use a fence for. Another thing you can use fence gates for, you can also use them for handles of a cart. The next category are buttons and pressure plates. Now, we've already used a pressure plate over here for a cute little table, but you can use buttons and pressure plates to make outdoor decorations and stepping stones. Now, they make a lot of fun noise when you walk across the pressure plates. One thing that's really fun to use pressure plates for are for some more of your organic builds and for decorating around a base and giving it a little bit of greenery and stones and life. Pressure plates can add to the texture of an area without giving it a whole lot of extra weight and without using full blocks. Pressure plates, moss, and little buttons, stone buttons, wood buttons, make really neat little stones for your area. Another fun thing that you can do with pressure plates and also with buttons are to use them in your wooden structures to give it a little bit more depth and to give it a little bit more stability. So putting buttons around your little gate makes it look like there's actually something holding it together. Putting pressure plates on top give you a little bit of a line or a pop of color at the top, and also makes it completely spawn-proof. Another fun thing that I like to use pressure plates and buttons for are for interior design ideas. Say you have an interior desk, you can put a pressure plate down and it looks a little bit like a keyboard. It's not great, but it looks a little bit like a keyboard. Then you can add a button for a mouse, and then you can add a little painting. And that will give you the look of a little laptop. Another thing I enjoy using buttons for are on the bottoms of lamps to give them that kind of look like an overhead ceiling lamp. Or you can actually use them for their intended purpose and make a switch for a light that you can turn off and on. The family of iron, copper, and redstone components can be used, obviously, for their intended purposes, but there's a lot of really cool things that you can do with these blocks that are more decorative, as opposed to actually using them for their purpose. Such as the note block makes a really cool decorative block. It makes a really interesting pattern on a wall, or you can just make them look like a pair of speakers around a jukebox. The daylight detectors make a very interesting floor pattern that would give you a little bit of a raise. They are shorter than a half slab by just a little bit, so if you wanted a gradual staircase block, you could use these daylight detectors for just a tiny step up. You can also use them for an interesting ceiling design. Now, mind you, they're an expensive ceiling design. But look at that cool chocolate color, like that chocolate block looked from the bottom. Iron bars and chains can be used for all sorts of things, just like any of our fences or gates. You can use the chains for their intended purpose to make chains. You can make chains look like tables. You can make chains look like lamps or like floating blocks if we wanted to hang chains down off here and put in a floating speaker, we could do something like that as well. We can use bars for the same purpose, making tables or making lamps, making just a very tall towers, anything very industrial. You can make a redstone lamp on the top and put that on top of a skyscraper for the red light that's at the top. You can make antenna out of them, which is one of my favorite things to do. You could use a combination of a fence along with your chains to make power lines. Hoppers can be used for some very unique design possibilities too. We could use a combination of a hopper and a tripwire hook, for example, to make a floating sink. You can use a minecart for the same thing. It is considered an entity. So an entity is something that is not always going to render into your world because it is movable. And because of that, you can do some unique things with it. So if we were to take a little plot of land with some potatoes, for instance, and put a minecart down, those little potatoes are going to come through. Then if you bone meal it, it'll look like a planter. Other redstone components, such as our crafter here, have very unique textures. Some of these things can be used not for their intended purposes, but as a really cool structural blocks. So if we had a line of these going across, you could make a really cool design with the back of a crafter. You could also use the bottom of a crafter for a ceiling. Look at how nice that looks. Redstone components in general are really cool decorative blocks. Even if you don't know anything about redstone at all, putting a few bits and bobs around a workshop, putting in some interesting little pieces, can give you a whole bunch of ideas for a very interesting electrical components and very scientific looking build. Even if you never use a single bit of the redstone for its intended purpose, you can still use it for all sorts of cool things. In one of my lighting videos, I actually showed how you can use these cool switches for your lighting. But you can also use these for other things as well. So if we wanted to attach bars, it has a very unique look to it. And if we wanted to do chains, for example, you could also hook up some cool chains, have dangly items coming off of these. I have also seen these used for sconces for candles, but you do have to do a little setup first. So you take a block where it's going to sit at the top, and a half slab will work, or any other solid block. Put a candle there, put a little switch underneath it, and make sure it's flipped up, and that will create a very interesting looking candle sconce. You can also have them facing down, for example, and have them as a hanging pot. Tripwire hooks, besides being a really good faucet, can also be a hook on the wall, or they could be a dispenser for a water cooler. And if we add one of these pressure plates on top, it looks like your very own water cooler. As for these copper grates, I can't even begin to get into how many uses these have, but just as a few different things, you can use them for grates in the flooring. You can use them for water pipes. The textures connect as you kind of go up and around. And you can do just so many things with these guys. You can use them as windows, you can use them as ceilings, you can use them as vents around a air conditioning system. There are just so many uses for these things that I think you could figure those out on your own. Banners, beds, and carpets. You can use them for their intended purpose, a banner, a bed, and a carpet, or you can use them for other things. Banners are really cool as curtains. They can also be used as window shutters, just as we use the trapdoors. You can use banners for laundry, hanging on a laundry line, or for decorative banners of some, or decorative flags of some sort. You can use them in a combination of patterns to give different shapes on the wall. You can use a combination of a bed and some of these trapdoors. And make some really cool patio furniture out of them. You can also use beds and trapdoors in order to make cool bunk beds. A bed can also be made into a crib or even a coffin. Carpets can be used, of course, to hide lighting, to spawn-proof areas, to give areas with wool some depth. You can also make a bed look like a much bigger bed. And still make it usable. You can take and hide a decorative pot underneath it for a quick and easy doggy bowl. You can use carpets in the same way as trapdoors in order to make little side tables. You can also use them to make fleshy, carpeted settees and footstools. You could use them in conjunction with various bits and bobs and make a whole cat tree and a cat set up for your pets. One of my favorite things to use carpet with are in decorative outdoor settings where we might want patio furniture. You do need to use string to be able to put a carpet on top of it to make it invisible, so it does take a little bit of time. As you notice, I'm kind of working my way around the square here until you have an interconnected ring around a fence post, for example. But then after that, you can put multiple colors of wool carpets on top to make it look like an umbrella. Another thing that also looks like a towel is a banner. If we give it a little bit of a striped look and hang it on the side of a bathtub, boom, towel. In this next section, we are going to be doing a bit of a speed run with all of the utility blocks. Obviously, all of these blocks have very specific uses or no uses at all. But there are things that you can do with each of these, but we're going to run through one creative way to use these that is not its intended purpose. The crafting table is the first block we're going to use outside of its intended purpose, and that is going to be as a decorative block for the wall. You can put them inside the wall in different shapes. Now, unfortunately, you do only have one side, but you can have a really cool texture going with a lot of tools. And if we had them going this way, you would have a rack of all sorts of tools that you could use in a hardware store situation. The stone cutter, it is super utilitarian. So besides using it for a stone cutter, you could also make like a wood cutter or something. But here is something you may not have thought about. If we take a couple of these note blocks, some cool little colorful trapdoors, and maybe put a colorful carpet on top, you get a pretty decent looking jukebox out of it. You could decorate that up in other colors as well, and it looks like a CD or a record spinning up above. The cartographer table has a lot of different uses. Besides the fact that it has a very unique vertical texture that's different than dark oak planks, it also has a few sides that have decoration on them. These decorative sides could be used in a dark oak wall to give it a look of something hanging on the wall, just like we did with the craft table. But you can also just use this depending on which way it faces, because remember, it's always going to face the same direction no matter what way you put it. But you can use it as a focal point in a room with the vertical slabs. In addition to that, you can also use these as a very interesting looking desk. And one of the favorite things that I love to do is actually use these as a side table by a bed so that it looks like there's all sorts of pieces of paper and stuff kind of scattered around on the side table. You could also use these ever so often in a floor design too, where it looks like somebody has dropped a whole bunch of junk on the floor. Fletching tables really don't have too much of a use except for decor and for our villagers who, when we want a Fletcher villager, which we don't want them very often, but you can use them for decorating and making a shooting gallery. But you could also use them in a birch floor where you wanted to have a different texture in the floor here and there, because it does have a really interesting looking square pattern. Now, it will look like there's stuff that has been dropped on the floor, but in a interesting interior design, you might find a use for it. Our next block, the smithing table, is also a very decorative block, but it also has a very unique top and bottom texture, which you can use in a lot of cool builds in ceilings and in floors. One thing that a lot of people like to use it in a floor build is with blackstone. The grayish, pinkish, purpley black color goes really well together with the blackstone, and of any of the types of blackstone. And if we come up here and give ourselves a little bit of ceiling room, it makes a really awesome looking ceiling from the bottom texture. Our next block is the grindstone. The grindstone, you can make all sorts of cool things with it. I have seen people use these little legs to be able to build scarecrows with. I have seen these used as wheels underneath a car or a cart. I have also seen these used as a pulley system of sorts, because they will connect pretty decently with a chain to make it look like you are having a pulley pull up something. Our next block is the loom. The looms actually have some really interesting front and side textures. The front texture is really quite stunning in the way it could look like a radiator in like a build underneath a window. Perhaps you could make it look like a grill, just putting a little bit of smoke out in front, and maybe we can put a back on it and some sides, and then you have a campfire grill. But it also has these really unique side panels that before we got our chiseled bookshelves, or it can also be used as like a drawer if we give it like a button. Smokers are a very unique block that could also be set on top of a campfire just like this to make it look like it's actually smoking. But it has some really cool top and bottom textures. It has a very cool round texture that could look like a drain in a shower. You could also use a back texture with these with some other blocks to make a very cool, stable looking foundation. You could also set up what looks like a very old-timey looking computer setup by putting one up on a desk, and it looks kind of like a weird monitor. Campfires you can use to decorate all sorts of things, but as I pointed out over here, you can also use campfires to make smoke and other particles come out. You can also use them if we wanted to make a hidden steamy bathtub or a hot water spring or a waterfall where you could have these particles coming out and they'd be hidden, but it looks really convincing to give you that look. The anvil is a very expensive block to use, but I have seen these used for 2 or 3 different purposes. One purpose I find a lot of people like to use is for a rail, or like a train car. I have seen them use these as a lamp post. And I've also seen these used a lot as a railing for a porch. Composters have a whole lot of different uses. Besides using them as a trash can or a toilet, I have seen them used as just their texture around a build. They have a very unique texture. I have also seen them used as a display. Once you have them all filled up, you can actually put a clay pot on them. And if we take a little dead bush and some kind of greenery, you can have a really cool little plant stand. Just like a lot of these other utility blocks, use them for their under textures. And composters have a really unique looking texture on the bottom that you could use for a ceiling. Cauldrons can be used as a really cool, like, cooking pot. It can be used over a campfire for its intended purpose as a cauldron. It kind of looks like a toilet too. You can use those as sinks, anything that you want to put water in. One design I found that I really enjoy is this one, where you take a glass pane and a fence and make it look like an outdoor faucet and an outdoor tub of sorts. It can look like a trough, like a feeding trough for animals. And if you're in Bedrock, and unfortunately Java, we can't do this, you can make it all sorts of colored potions in a cauldron, and they will give you all sorts of like additional ideas. Like you could put a couple of them together to make them look like you have a washing and dyeing station, but can't do that in Java, unfortunately. Next up, the beehive. The beehive I've seen used in quite a few different ways, but one of the favorites people love to use it for is for this top texture for floors. I have also seen them use it just in a display with other kinds of barrels and all sorts of different storage, because they look a lot like a printer box or a paper box or a storage container. I have also seen them used as ceilings because they do have the same texture on the bottom as they have on the top. We now come to the last of our decorative blocks. We have done so many different ideas this episode so far, so let's do just a few extras before we're done. Now, the decorative pot, I've already shown a few different ways that you can use it, but one thing you have to keep in mind is this top section of the pot, you can pretend it doesn't actually exist. It is there, but it is an entity. So it is something that you can pretend like it doesn't exist. So anytime you want to use one of these, if you want to set them on top of one another, they will stack. You can put things like flower pots in them, and on top of them, you can put lamps in them. You can put fence posts in them. You can put end rods sticking out of them, etc. All you have to do is imagine what you would like to put on top of a pot, and you can do it. The lodestone is a very expensive block in the version that I am playing it, but in the upcoming snapshots, they are way less expensive to use. So I would definitely use the heck out of them for decorative blocks if you have an iron farm and you are playing any version higher than 1.21.4. In the snapshot right now, I can't use this except for by crafting it with a netherite ingot, but with an iron ingot, that opens up all sorts of amazing decorative builds that you can do on the floors with this very beautiful texture, and you can use them as a decorative block in your builds, on your pillars, in your walls, in ceilings. They have the exact same texture on the bottom as they do the top. The lightning rod, I have already shown you an idea of what you can do with the lightning rods. Lightning rods stack on top of one another very clear, so they can make a very cool bars for a cage. They could make very cool pipes in a build where you are running pipes from one solid block to another. Note that they do not connect, unfortunately, when from a top to a bottom, so you would need to do something of a connector block. But if you put, say, one of these in here, you would have a very cool connection for these. You can turn around the direction that the ball faces by facing them in different directions, but they are a lot like the end rod, where they always will have a knot on one side, so you can be very careful with how you're placing them so that they look very unique in their structure. And if you need longer sections, you can attach them just like that. Next up is the chiseled bookshelf. The chiseled bookshelves obviously can be filled with books. You can add them into a whole bookshelf unit of sorts, but they have an amazing side texture and they have an amazing top and bottom texture. So if you have not used these in a floor design yet or a ceiling design, I would absolutely recommend using these blocks to their full potential and not just in an empty bookshelf. Barrels have an absolutely amazing texture. One thing that I used them for in this build over here was as hidden storage, but they make a really beautiful block. You can also use them as other kinds of decorations. For example, if you combine a barrel like this with a tripwire hook, it looks like a wine barrel, and it looks like you could come up here and tap out your favorite liquid. Our last few blocks that I'm going to go through really quickly are our bamboo scaffolding, our frog lights, the lectern and hanging signs, and bamboo signs too. So like I pointed out over there with the trapdoors, signs are very helpful when it comes to putting in arms of a chair, for decorating around a lamp, for adding a little extra structure to that chair that you built, and for just kind of putting around your builds, just making signs, making strips that aren't a full block wide. You can make very cool displays using signs, and using the scaffolding you can do all sorts of displays and tables. I have seen so many cat trees and decor created from these kinds of blocks. Frog lights have an amazing recessed lighting look. They have a really incandescent look. So if you are building the back rooms or you are building a very modern looking store, the ochre frog lights and some of these other lights have a very cool, not cool, but warm looking light design, and it blends in as a very smooth texture for your builds. Our last two things are lecterns and these jungle hanging signs. I think that these hanging signs are still underutilized. I have seen so many people use these in different ways. So there are 3 different textures for a hanging sign. The first of which is the one that it connects to blocks. And you get that by putting a sign down against the side of a block. And then you can actually connect them up with each other. This will make a very awesome railing, which I didn't do for these porches, but I could totally do that for these porches from our previous video. Depending on how you place the signs, and just a quick demo of how you place these signs, if you place them on the side of the block, you are going to get this top, and then you can actually bust them out and they will stay where they are, which is really awesome. So if you want to place a sign down, I can't place one here, but you place one down, put it down, and then remove the original block, and it will stay in place so you can add as many signs as you want. But for hanging purposes, you can come underneath, and if you crouch and hang, you can actually get it to connect in the center. And you can actually do this in different directions so that it will connect facing different ways. If you don't want it to connect at a single point on a block, you can take and just click at the bottom of the block without crouching, and it will do this cool double chain thing. Our last decorative item is the lectern. One thing to remember about the lectern, the top of this block is actually right here, this little center wire frame right here. So you could put a trapdoor on top of it, you could put a carpet on top of it, you could put a moss, you could put another lectern on top of it. Just remember that this is actually the top of the block, not this section, this is. So using that to your advantage, if you put some wool carpeting on top, and then be very careful to aim at the carpet itself with a trapdoor, and give it a little room here, you can flip these up to create a really cool high top chair. So you can do that up against a bar. Another thing you can use them for as we wrap up here is actually a railing on a very large porch or a very large walkway. Remember, this is the top of the block here, so if you put trapdoors, for instance, along this top edge, it actually hides where the podium goes up above where it actually ends, and it looks like a really cool railing. So there you have it, everybody. Dozens of ways to use existing blocks in different ways than their original use in order to put some decoration and life in your builds. I hope that you found this video inspiring, if not a little bit educational, and I hope you find ways to be able to use these items in your builds. I am going to be striving over the next few weeks in my CraftWorks videos to use some of these ideas myself so you can see them in an actual build. So if you're interested, definitely hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, leave me a comment. I would love to see what you are actually working on, and if you were able to use any of these designs in your own builds. If you're old enough to join our Discord, the CraftWorks Discord is in the doobly-doo below. For now, that's going to be it for me today. I hope you enjoyed. Love you all very, very much. And give yourselves a hug for me. I am so pleased as punch that everybody has been enjoying these little tutorials in the gray box. So there will be more to come, but if you have a specific idea that you've had in mind for a while, leave it down in the comments. I'd like to know about it. There are so many ideas that sometimes I can't make up my mind, so obviously you get a video like this, where there are dozens and dozens of ideas all thrown at you at once. So I hope it's not too much for you, and I hope you get some use out of it all. I will see you all next time. Have a great week. Bye for now.